Hi, and welcome to What's Important to You with me, James Dean. On the show, I will be talking to people from all walks of life and asking them the question, what's important to you? Because I believe once we understand what's important, then we can build the life that we truly want to live. I hope you are inspired by the guests that I talk to and answer that question for yourself and build the life that you truly want. You can support the show by clicking on the subscribe button, sharing your favorite episode, or leaving your comments. Thanks for watching. Today's guest is a HSP Alignment Coach and Entrepreneur and is hugely passionate about the HSP, highly sensitive people, and empaths expressing their unique magic in the world. Her work is all about alignment and bringing balance to the depth and intensity of the HSP experience. She is on a mission to uplift and empower purpose-driven, highly sensitive and empathetic leaders so they can align with their purpose, unblock their creativity and turn their calling into a reality. Her focus is on applying the trait of high sensitivity to achieve truly original, creative and evolutionary contributions in the world. Sensitivity is a powerful force and is meant to serve a purpose, and today's guest offers an aligned and authentic approach to embodying sensitivity in meaningful ways. She has been empowering the potential and dreams of others for over 15 years as a certified career, personal, and executive coach, and she mixes energy work and spirituality with knowledgeable insight and strategy. Today, we find out what's important to Sinead Rafferty. Hi Sinead, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi James, thanks for having me. Delighted to be here.
Yeah, really looking forward to chatting to you. So we're going to dive straight in, Sinead, with the first question, which is always, Sinead, what's important to you?
Well, obviously I was giving this a lot of thought, and I'm sure a lot of people answer with, of course, the people in my life, my kids, my husband, my friends, my family. The people in my life are really the most important thing to me, and I think that's something we probably all share. But after that, I guess, my answer to your question, your beautiful question, and I absolutely love the premise of your podcast, is authenticity and expression. So really expressing ourselves, our true nature. My focus and my work is I work with highly sensitive people and empaths. So I'm very passionate about authenticity and how we can express ourselves fully to really make an impact in the way that we're inherently supposed to, So that's the short answer.
Very good. No, I love that. And you're right in the sense of those first initial things that everyone says about things like family and that, generally at the top of the tree. But the thing you said there, the authenticity has come up quite a bit in the sense of importance to people. But the word expressing, now that's a new word, the expression of it, because it's actually, people can say they're authentic, but it's the potential of action that really demonstrates it. So it's an interesting add-on to say that it's the expression of authenticity that's important.
Well, exactly. I mean, in my sphere, with highly sensitive people in particular, there's a lot of talk of the challenges involved and how to mitigate them, how to kind of thrive as a HSP. But I truly believe that we're given the character and the traits and the personality and the uniqueness that we have, our zone of genius, if you like, for a reason, and it's in applying it really that we can really bring magic to the world in an entirely new way. And that's what I'm really passionate about, and I am unapologetically really idealistic about it. I'm a total dreamer. I'm an eternal optimist. It doesn't mean I'm optimistic every single day of my life, but in terms of my philosophy, I think that if there's a beautiful idea in the back of someone's mind, then it should be brought forward.
Yeah, and one of the things it was in our previous conversation as well, and you said it a few times there as well, in the sense of the people that you particularly work with, in the sense of that the highly sensitive people, as you refer to them. Is that something that you kind of always kind of gravitated to work with those types of people, or what was it that sort of, is it something that you've now defined? Where did that come from?
Okay, so it's a long enough story, but I've been a coach for 15 years, right? So I'm a career coach, right? So and as I say, if you can explain something to a 4-year-old, that's the simplest way. So I would say to my 4-year-old, I help people follow their dreams. That's what mommy does for her job, you know? So that's what I do and what I've always done. And I've worked with people in all areas. So career progression, career advancement, education, entrepreneurship, etc. And then it's only in the past 2 or 3 years that I've started to specialize in high sensitivity, working with HSPs and empaths. So that came about because I am a HSP and I am an empath. So I've navigated the waters for many years, and have done so with a lot of curiosity. You know, I've asked lots and lots of questions of my own experience. I've read an awful lot about it. And when I began to kind of uncover the research on it, which is now about 30 years old, I realized that the coaching that I was doing was actually in line with this for a long time anyway. And it was a beautiful thing to have my work affirmed really by people like Dr. Elaine Aron, who is the author of The Highly Sensitive Person, and the psychologist who would have kickstarted a lot of the research back in the early 90s. So we have a lot of evidence now, you know, a lot of research studies to describe what the trait of high sensitivity is, also known as high sensory intelligence or high sensory perception. And then being an empath, just to kind of differentiate a little, I mean, it's all the one experience with different labels. And, you know, and the last thing that I would like to do is put anyone into a box. But at the same time, for our understanding, sometimes these names can be very useful. But an empath would tend to absorb the energies of others and really feel and sense what's going on for people. But in saying that, all the HSPs I've ever worked with, you know, they have an empathic nature and they would tend to consider themselves empaths as well. So that's kind of how I came around to working with these incredible people. And it's a joy for me now. It's an absolute joy to be with my clients. You know, I found my tribe as such.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you for going through those sort of the two definitions of them as well, because I think it's important for people to understand the definitions. And it's interesting as well, consider like even the phrase, but even the highly, you know, sensitive people, or the highly sensitive person. But the fact that you're saying that the research has been going on, more modern research, for 30 years, there's probably more as well, I'd say, going back. But if we think of
Indeed.
sort of the moment now, in a sense of, I think, the modern time, that sort of, we have this unfortunate sort of clickbaity phrase of young people or millennials, whatever you call it, and this sort of horrific term that I find of snowflake and all these sorts of things, of that people are, you know, too sensitive and all this sort of stuff, which I don't believe. I think it's complete nonsense myself, but because it's deemed as almost some people will be seen as a negative. Oh, you're highly sensitive would mean that there's something bad or wrong or negative about it. So, you know, when you've been trying to sort of more put itself out there as this person to work with those people, you know, is it something that people have to almost to admit to themselves that, you know what I mean? In a sense, is almost like is there a stigma in a sense of like calling myself a highly sensitive person?
100%, you're absolutely right. You know, which is why a lot of my colleagues are perhaps trying to reframe the label itself into, you know, statements like high sensory intelligence. So the word sensitive can be an unfortunate word in some ways, because when us HSPs hear the word sensitive, we kind of shiver a little. It's fair enough. It's true to say, because most likely of our experience growing up. Right. So we live in a society where 70 to 80% of people are non-HSP. So even people who were extremely well-meaning would have been giving us the messages of like, oh, would you ever stop being so sensitive? Just toughen up, like just put up with it, just sort it out. Stop wearing your heart on your sleeves, you know, and stop. So because of our capacity then for empathy, right, we then would begin to mask all of these beautiful innate abilities. And that's why masking is very much something that HSPs do. And it's on the kind of the same, I mean, it's not the same as neurodiversity to the point of ADHD and ASD, but it is within this realm, you know what I mean? Because our brains function differently, right? And we respond, we're more neurologically and more emotionally responsive. So we have been told for many years that that's wrong. Then a lot of people begin to actually internalize, it becomes part of their identity. That's why I do a lot of identity work with my clients. They internalize that there's something wrong, you know, and really there is absolutely nothing wrong. There's nothing to fix. It's a natural biological trait. But for most people, looking back and reframing and healing some of those childhood experiences or experiences in the past are very important for empowering our identity now, which is kind of part of the work that I do.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've said that a word a few times as well. We're bringing the whole thing of identity into it as well. So, you know, because there's an element in sense of, if someone is first acknowledging, in a sense, if you say that the way they are as a person, that they're going back to that authenticity side of stuff. But then that word of identity is sort of a very, not a new word, but very much in the sort of realm of discourse at the moment, that word of identity, for many different reasons.
Yeah.
But when you're from a coaching perspective, where do you say, how does that come into it as well when you're talking about identity?
Well, what I would say is, like, you know, it's how we define ourselves. And the way that we define ourselves sets an example for how we want others to treat us and to see us and perceive us, you know. But again, we're back to the capacity of empathy. So when we don't know that most of our responses are based on the needs of others and not the needs of ourselves, then we can end up losing our sense of self and losing the magic that makes us so highly valuable in society and in business and in entrepreneurship, in every sector, in every industry, you know? So it's really about returning to authenticity and expressing yourself completely authentically and bravely doing so. So, you know, I would often say bravely be you, because it can be a difficult thing when you've had to adjust and adapt for a long time. But the validation that comes when you kind of go, oh, that sounds like me. That's exactly how my brain works. That's, you know, there's a lot of kind of head nodding when I often say it's a gift for one HSP to tell another all about it, because then you kind of go, oh, right, that's making perfect sense to me now, you know? So then that gives validation and permission and energy and momentum to then creating the identity that you want. I mean, you know, in my opinion, identity at the end of the day is a choice. You know, you get to say, well, who am I? You know, who was I? Who am I now? Am I still that? Was I ever that? You know, and you get to kind of say, right, well, I'm going to decide consciously who I am and what I'm all about, you know, and then go about expressing that.
Yeah, absolutely. So with the sort of the HSP, is it still working in a capacity regarding career, or is it more broader that you work with?
Well, I suppose there's always a professional focus to it, you know, in
Yeah.
terms of how we are in the world, how we're expressing ourselves, making the impact that a lot of HSPs want to make. Like, the people I tend to work with are very purpose driven, you know, they're seeking meaningful work in the world, kind of thing, you know. So there is a professional slant on it. But I suppose what I'm seeing more and more in the work in the group that I have currently is that we talk an awful lot about thought leadership, you know, and really being yourself truly is thought leadership, because you're leading in whatever it is you believe in. You know what I mean? And I think that ultimately I'm realizing now that my work, my own calling, is about helping empathic leaders, you know, because the world needs empathic leadership now, maybe more than ever before. And we need it in every sector, as I say. And as well, when you look at a lot of the studies around, well, what's the future of work? What's, you know, 21st century skills? You know, we're well into the 21st century now, but, you know, it's empathy is very much at the heart of every conversation around the future of
Absolutely.
work and what's required, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. No, because I was interested in the sense, because just thinking it from a perspective of my own sort of experience within career and work over the last 20 or so years, corporate spaces and things, that element of, and I think it's maybe adjusting, but there's still that element of, if we say that maybe the numbers, you say statistics, 7 out of 10 people are not necessarily that way thinking, or that way sort of their brain doesn't or work in that sort of more empathetic way, or that more highly sensitive way, then they're told to sort of keep control of that, if for a word of a better word, then there's the perspective on decision making, the perspective on what to do within a workspace, a corporate space, is quite the same. Whereas if people, as you say, that you work with, are empowered to be themselves and speak up in the way that's themselves, there is potentially chance that work can be transformed or changed, whether it be a small team or a company, because there could be an element of a lack of empathy in sometimes and I'm thinking from the most sort of high level of a company, it's just like, no, make as much money as possible. Do you know what I mean? In a sense of, without that
Yeah.
sort of those layers. So the more that people who are in that sort of cohort that you work with are given that empowerment to be themselves and speak up more, the more chance that those changes in those companies can be actually made.
Exactly. I mean, it goes back to, so 2 points, right? The studies show that the element of high sensitivity is actually found in over 100 species, right? So Mother Nature decided on this, right? This is something that
Yeah.
it was given to us as a species, you know what I mean, as human beings, but it's proven in 100 plus other species, you know, that there is a percentage of the population that will be more pensive, more cautious, will think more deeply, will respond more strongly, you know, and, you know, even they can be referred to as well as the canary in the coal mine, you know. So there's an inherent purpose, I believe, in the fact that 20 to 30% of us, the studies are showing now it's more like 30%, that 30% of us have this draw and this innate ability towards this capacity for empathy, and capacity for depth of thought and depth of emotion, depth of expression, etc., etc. So there's that, right? But there's also a beautiful way to put it that Elaine Aron puts. It's my favorite part, really, of her book. Is she kind of says that, you know, a society is often made up of two classes: the kind of the warrior kings on the one hand, who want to go out and conquer, right? And then they will always have their kind of royal advisors beside them, you know, with their learned priests, is what maybe she would have said, you know, and that both elements of this society are required. You know, it wouldn't make sense if 100% of people were highly sensitive, because maybe Mother Nature in her genius, that wouldn't work. And it wouldn't make sense if 100% were the warrior kings. You know what I mean? So I think it's all about identifying the important role that our natural true nature is here to offer, you know? And I think that's the part that if we can validate it enough, you know, and sometimes, you know, well, oftentimes it's the science that does the validation, because we like the facts, don't we? We like the tangible facts, particularly maybe the non-HSPs like the facts. So it's important that we have that validation, so then highly sensitives can actually apply this beautiful gift of high sensory perception, you know.
Absolutely. And from your experience working with these people in that sort of capacity, what then, because you're saying, I love the way you've referred to as their gift. What do you think then is specifically that those people who kind of identify their way bring to the table versus the other sort of 70%? What are those gifts as such?
Well, I suppose I would always put it, you know, as it's thinking outside the box, I suppose, is how it would be referred to. But in fact, it's more about just removing the box altogether, you know.
I love that.
That's what the HSPs tend to do. They kind of go, "What box? What are you talking about?" You know, there's an immediate natural sense of like, I'm not going to think in this contained way. Why would I? There's too many things to consider here, you know. So, you know, with that, you have attention to detail, you know, global thinking. Their HSPs have a way of connecting the dots. And I've heard it so many times from my clients. They're kind of like, "Oh, I connected the dots again today. I'll have to wait 6 months until until my boss realizes that, you know what I mean? Or whatever. They
Okay.
can connect the dots. They can see how things are put together very quickly. And then, of course,
Mm.
the emotional intelligence, the social skills that come with that, the creativity, the imagination, and even risk taking, and
Mm.
being able to think outside the box may be risky. Removing the box altogether is maybe what is required, so innovation is coming into play all the time. So I call my clients trailblazers, because
Mm.
they tend to be the creatives or the educators, the healers, the coaches, maybe the environmentalists, the visionary entrepreneurs. These are the people who are trying to affect change. They want to make an impact in the world, so they're trailblazing, and they are doing so, courageously, but they can only do that if their true nature is validated, which is what
Mm.
I'm trying to do.
Yeah, I love it. And because I'm interested in the sense of what we were saying, you were saying earlier about the whole maybe in a previous time, or that maybe they had that in their lives where it's like, you say those things of like, oh, the question of why are you being so sensitive? Just, that whole idea of just suck it up and get on with it type thing. And almost feeling that, well, they can't let themselves be themselves. But one of the words which I find really interesting, that you said that the creative aspect of people. So I'd be interested in the sense of when you've worked with people, or anyone, not necessarily specific, when you work with people and you've kind of enabled them to come out of themselves, has anyone kind of then surprised you with some sort of creativeness that you weren't expecting, if that makes sense?
That's a good question. Well, you see, I suppose being a HSP, I would just be always in an expansive place in my mind anyway. So I would
Yeah.
be expecting their creativity to surprise me on a daily basis, surprise and delight. You
Yes.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
When it comes to creativity, I suppose it's all about flow. It's all about the creative
Yeah.
flow. So
Yes.
for anyone, HSPs in particular, but for anyone to get into that creative flow, the energy has to be right. You know what I mean? There has to be
Mm.
energy management. So my focus a lot with my clients is on energy management. So once they accomplish that, then you can see that their creative flow has returned or it's elevated, and then they're bravely being themselves out in the world, But the joy is
Yes.
that like they're coming from, the clients I work with are from all different sectors.
Mm.
So it's not like we're comparing notes within one industry or anything, but
Yes.
as one of the group put last week, he said, it feels like I'm hearing my life today in 5-part harmony. You know what I mean? Because
Wow.
the experience is so comparable, even though we're coming from such different worlds. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
even know if that answers your question on creativity,
Yeah.
but that's what's come up
Yeah,
for me.
no, yeah, no, because I was just remembering back to some people that I work with, or just had previously, and I found it interesting the allowance of people to talk. It's an interesting thing. Just if you're, whether be in this situation, or doing a chat like this, or if you're in a coaching situation, but allowing people to just talk and talk. When I've had people who would be, you know, you just weren't expecting what they were going to say. So one person who was in like sort of the world of tech, and after a few conversations was, oh, I've always been interested in local politics. And you're like, where did that come from? Or
Right.
the other
Yeah.
guy, the guy who's in like
Yes.
data analyst and stuff, and he's like, oh, actually, I'm really interested in social care. It's that, but so these people have been sort of, because they have a certain skill set in one area, and the expectation of the perception of the way of other people see them, they're almost like, well, I really, or they could be anything. They could be into some sort of artistic venture or something, but because they have this sort of created this identity that maybe he has put onto them, or they've put it themselves, this creative aspect that they want is quietened down, and like they might have not told anyone for years that this is something that interested them, but just by
Yeah.
allowing them to talk and just not judging their decision, like, it's amazing what people will actually tell you, or what they will
Yeah.
actually go on to do.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I see where you're coming from now. It's absolutely amazing, and I'm sure you've had the same experience as myself, that you might be talking to someone and they're very hesitant and reluctant and fearful of even putting words on this beautiful thing that they want to do, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that can be the work we have to do with
Yeah.
clients initially, to be able just to get them to the point where it's okay to say it out loud. You're in a safe space, you know? So that to me would kind of point to, you know, as I said, you know, it's not, I will always ask people, what's that beautiful idea in the back of your head?
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's my question. If I had a
Yeah.
podcast, what's that beautiful idea? What's that thing you keep tucked away? And they
Yeah.
keep it tucked away for a reason, because they're protecting it. You know,
Yeah.
they're keeping it safe, you know. But then I would always say to them, but look, if you keep it there for too long, it will only live in dreamland and in the
Yeah.
tomorrows, you know. So if you keep it too safe, like, you know, you have to take it out,
100.
give it some TLC, you know, let it see the light, you know. And then, yeah, it's
100%.
a beautiful thing. But I think, to be honest, we're back to identity, I think, there,
Yeah.
because if someone has it tucked away so deep, it's because they are living in a different way. And that's what I would call misaligned identity, when you feel one
Mm.
way, but you're living another. And I was
Yep.
there myself a few years ago. And I used to describe it as playing a role in my own life, you know,
Yep. Yep.
going to work, putting on that persona or whatever, and just as far from authenticity. And I
Mm.
just was so frustrated and so like, how can this can't be my life. This is not who I am. You know what I mean? You're nodding away. You've obviously
100%.
had the same
100%,
experience.
because 100%, because, and I think we've probably come up with a similar thing in different ways, and the same thing, and it was, for me, as you say, that the dream thing that you say, what's that dream? I used to refer to it as a spark. That's the way I used to say
Oh,
it, and that,
right.
and the same
Brilliant.
thing, and then, and when I was doing all this stuff about being authentic, and because it kept coming up in this podcast with people, and my sort of definition, and I'm sure people have said it before, the way I came, it was like, it's what you say and do, a reflection of how you think and feel. You know, as you say,
Mhm.
because you turn up to work and you say the certain things, you act a certain way, but you go back to your desk, or you leave, and that evening you go, well, Jesus, I really didn't care a jot about that today.
Mm.
I had
Yeah.
no, you know, it didn't, I did it for in years, and I was, and this is the thing as well, that people, I think, can get misconstrued, is like, whatever I did in my previous career in that sort of space within financial services, I was good at it. I was, quote
Mm.
unquote, quite successful, and I
Yeah.
could have continued to had a very successful career and done whatever I wanted. But when you really get down and be really honest with yourself, it's like, I did not care, and
Mm.
that says that's a huge thing that we have to sort of really reconcile and kind of go, because if you try and sort of suppress that I do not care and think I'll just, then that'll eat away, like it really will, so you have to kind of get to a point where it's like, well, actually, that you can supplement stuff, you can do things to kind of, because sometimes there's a need to do stuff, there's a financial need,
Yeah.
there's before you change, so you kind of think, or to hell with this, and just I'll just, we live in a world where we do have to earn, and there's realities, but how can you chip away and start to build it up to do something that you really want to do? And that, so I think it's an important thing that you don't ignore those voices as such, because when you were saying that, one of the things I always say to that thing of like that spark or that dream thing you'd love to do, not to say a professional thing, but one of the things I was always growing up was I wanted to do a marathon. So that was my thing when I was like throughout my years
Oh,
of
yeah. Right.
London Marathon. I was growing up, and I'd love to do it. And I said that for years, I'd love to do that, love to do that. I never did it, but and it wasn't. I started the first one I did was just when I turned 30, and I went on to do more, and I actually did London last year. But I could have kept saying forever, I'd love to do that one day. There has to be a point where you go, I'm going to do it, or I am doing it, because
Mm.
the love to do it thing that's the dream that
Yeah.
stays, you
Well,
say, in your head.
it's the classic up level, isn't it? You know, it's the
Mm,
kind of um, pushing yourself from a place of safety and comfort into a place of growth. And especially as HSPs, we would have very sensitive nervous systems. So it takes an even another little push. Do you know what I mean? To
yeah.
push through that comfort zone, and to bring yourself to a place of up leveling, whatever that means for you. But that again is about stepping into a new identity, you know,
Mm.
and we all do that because I think, you know, I'm sure you'll agree the journey never ends. It's not like we reach the destination of our dreams and then we stop there. You know what I mean? Of course
Nope.
we don't. There's always a gap. It's always expansive. There's always the next thing. And what's really come up for me recently for myself is that on the precipice of the up level, that's when self-sabotage will just rear its head and say, hi, I'm here again. What do you think you're doing? Hold on. And the classic
Yes.
procrastination, imposter syndrome, all those things start to set in.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to break through a period of that. You have to be very persistent and persevere through that to then you kind of will wake up and you've embodied this new up level, the new
Yeah.
identity that you want to step into. And I think a lot of people get stuck in that place, you know.
Yeah. You just said it. As I was going to, when you're talking, I was thinking of that, the whole phrase of imposter syndrome. It's been around for years, but it's a I was just chatting to this, I think, to my wife about it in a different context. And I can't remember where I heard it from, from someone else in another show, another podcast. The whole thing of imposter syndrome, if you reframed it, it's like, if you have imposter syndrome, you're onto something that's actually quite good, because
Yes,
it means
yes,
that you're in that place of growth, that it means you're kind of like, oh, that's when you
exactly.
need to lean into it.
Lean in. Exactly, James. Like that's exactly it. I actually wrote a blog post on this a few years ago.
Brilliant.
You know, I called it "Is Imposter Syndrome Really a Bad Thing?" I don't think that it is,
Yes.
because it points
No.
to so much growth, so much self-awareness. Because the other end of the scale is called the what is it called? The Cunning Duger effect. Oh, you'll have to correct me now if I have the name wrong. It's the opposite end where you have an inflated sense of self,
Okay. Yeah, I know what you mean.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, so then you have an inflated sense of self, and then these are the people leading our world.
Yes.
Not
Yes.
the people at the other end with imposter syndrome who have brilliance
Yes.
inside them, but they're holding
Yes.
themselves back. But in fact, the other people at the other end of the scale who are
Yeah.
delusional to the point that they think they can run a country,
I was going to
etc.
say, we've both got a few politicians, I'd say. I'm sure people listening are like, oh yeah, I know who you mean. We won't go into names and stuff, but I'm sure we all know
No, let's
who we're
not go
thinking
there.
of. Yeah. But yeah, no, that's
Mm.
interesting. Yeah, no, and that's interesting. You wrote the blog, like, yes. Tell me more. I'm really interested in the sense of that perspective about the imposter syndrome.
Yeah, well, I do think that, you know, as you say, you're onto something because you are bringing awareness to what is possible, you know, what
Mm.
is that, you know, again, that spark or that idea inside you. But if you don't have that feeling of slight fear, it means that
Mm.
you're not pushing out of that growth zone. So it's kind of
Yeah.
it's the ego, you know, kind of holding us back. It's there to protect us. That's the whole point. So then I would always kind of talk about the ego versus maybe the higher self, because a lot of HSPs would be quite drawn to spirituality, quite drawn to, you know, that higher self, you know, the
Mm.
deeper work, that kind of thing. You know, I put a lot of meditations into my work, that kind of thing. So I think that there's these two voices going on. You know, you have your true inner voice versus the ego. And I think that when imposter syndrome comes up, you have to kind of say, okay, which voice is talking right now? You know, which
Mm.
one am I going to listen to? And sometimes, you know, in meditations, you want to invite your ego to leave the room, you know. That has happened. I learned that now from my own kind of spiritual coach, Marina Beach. And she will always say, just let your ego leave the room there, you know, so that you can truly tune in to what you truly want. So yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. Imposter syndrome is not something to be afraid of. It shows that you are courageous, and it shows
Yes.
definitely that you're onto something.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think because it's that to the piece I love to add on that, because I'm going to reference in a sense of the world where I find most suitable for myself is that whole space of getting into marathon running and endurance sports, which I did for a number of years. Um, that you can turn up at these events thinking, well, that the thought was, well, I don't look like them. I'm not them. They look, because you
Mm.
have this vision in your mind of a marathon runner as such, or I did triathlon, of a triathlete, but all you see is the pro, and you go, well, yeah, well, of course they're almost like a freaking sense of an unbelievable, amazing freak of nature in
Superhuman.
a sense. Superhuman, exactly. It's like, well, I used to, when I used to teach, I used to take people like running to couch to 5K and stuff, and they go, I'm a slow runner. I'm like, compared to who? Compared to like Kipchoge or Paula Radcliffe or Mo Farah or anyone? Because we're all slow compared to them. We're not going for that sort of level. We're just trying to do it for a bit of fun or a bit of exercise. But I remember going to like the first time I was doing triathlon and thinking, oh, with their bike's much better, or this and what their kit and stuff. And you think, oh, that whole thing of do I belong? And it's interesting. As soon as you start, everything, you forget it all, because in the end you realize you're just one of 100 or 1,000 people just trying to get to the finish line, and someone has a, the best kit, if you want to put it that way, or they have a $3,000 bike or whatever, but they're just trying to get to the end the same as you in whatever way they're trying to do it. And you realize none of that stuff actually matters once you get into it. It's the thought, the fear beforehand. And as you say,
You
that's what
build it
people,
up.
exactly. And that's what holds people back. They think the worst case scenario, and they believe that to be true, so they don't bother trying. Versus if you actually just went feck it and do it, the experience is nothing like what you expected.
No, it's so true. And I would always say that the discomfort in pushing yourself that little bit, I'm all about energy management and being grounded and protecting yourself and everything. But the slight discomfort that means that you're pushing yourself out of that comfort zone compared to what you achieve and what you receive is so fleeting, isn't it? And people can wait around for years to avoid this fleeting feeling that they quickly get over, and then that your whole world is opened up. It's mad.
100%.
And again, that is the ego coming into play, and then we compare ourselves to others, and there's so many things that feed into it, but it's fleeting. It really is. And then what you get, you're absolutely right, what you get is unexpected.
Yes, 100%. No, I love what you just said there as well, because that, I think, is about the comparison thing, because that's probably the other sort of, if we think of all the various things that can hold us people back or hold people back from doing that dream thing that you talked about, that comparison piece is, probably one of the biggest, if we think of the other things, what other people are going to think of you as one, but they, you projecting what they're going to think and comparing yourself to another person. How does that come into play with those people you work with?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one. I'm thinking, I'm kind of distracted here because I know you like to ask your guests for a quote. Am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah, can I fire that one out at the moment?
Let's go for it. Let's go for it.
Yeah, my favorite quote is actually, "Be yourself. Everyone else is already taken."
Yeah,
a classic, right? Classic Oscar Wilde. I absolutely love it, and I put it at the heart of everything that I focus on. Because when we're comparing, particularly with social media, and the world that we live in, we are not comparing apples with apples most of the time. That's the fact of the matter. And then when it comes to HSPs and people with a very empathic nature, they are comparing not only themselves with what they see, but they're also comparing, now stay with me on this, what they perceive the other person might be perceiving of them. 100%. So it layers and layers and layers. And there's, you end up in a place called, I refer to as should land, and then you're living your life in this reactive place. I should do this, I should do that, instead of stopping and saying, well, why should you do that? Is it because of something you've decided, or is it because of you're tuning into the expectations of others, the opinions of others? And then other people will have an opinion of you, but they are not going to be experiencing what it is to be you. They will always have a different lens. Even if they're your absolute loved ones and want the very best for you, they cannot have the lens that you have.
The madness that I have 3 Labradors. One of them is 6 years old, one's 4, and then I got a 6-month-old puppy. And the puppy decided to wake up. I know, we're lunatics.
That is a busy household.
Yeah. So again, so this is obviously because I got the oldest dog is called Kona, but that's a place where Ironman, which is the triathlon that's where it came from, sort of like,
Okay.
and so my dog is named after the Ironman World
Oh
Championships.
wow, are
So
you
sorry
really into
about,
the triathlon?
yeah,
Oh, don't worry.
yeah, no, we did, did marathon running, and then we did, got into triathlon and did Ironman triathlon, so long distance stuff. So it's like 140-mile one day triathlons, and the half distance. So I've done 2 of the full distance and 6 of the half and
Wow.
that stuff. Yeah. So yeah, the
You're
dog is
you're the
named after.
superhuman.
Yeah, but we'll go back to what we were talking about. That's the whole thing of talk about outside your comfort zone. That kind of came alongside in the sense of getting into what I do now, in a sense of like, I've kind of found this works for myself in the tangent of pushing yourself in a sort of physical way, and then it's so much more to do with your emotional, your mindset. It's funny because did personal training for a couple of years and stuff as well, and then I wanted to expand it further to go into coaching, because I found that it's getting better, but the world of fitness can be still quite sort of perceived as quite one dimensional in the sense of weight, size, things like that. Whereas actually being physically active is massively related to your mindset, your emotional
Oh,
intelligence.
listen.
It's much more that than it is the physical. So much more.
Yeah. Yeah, because I actually started with a personal trainer just before Christmas,
Yeah.
because I would be the classic, my emotional health is grand, my spiritual
Yeah.
health is grand. Oh God, where's my physical health gone the past 10 years, So I wanted to kind of get back to a place of strength like that, and I am finding that it's a lot of mindset work, a lot of
100%.
mindset work. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's very fascinating to me. I'm actually enjoying it, even though it's
Yeah.
torture. I am enjoying it.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, it's like, as I haven't been doing it. I said I did the London Marathon last year. That was the first. You had COVID came about, and I was kind of into a point where I was dialing it back. I think from 2013 through to 2019, I was doing like 2 or 3 events a year, so like the
Wow.
long distance marathons or triathlons. And so I got to a point where I was
That's
just
a
like,
lot.
I got to a point where I was like, and you're talking, when you get into Ironman, you're talking it's like a 40 full distance, a 40-week training program. You're getting into sort of 5-6 training sessions a week. Well, I was working and stuff, and then the money to do it, so I needed to dial it back a bit,
Right.
and I did
Wow.
anyway. And then just through changing career and all this sort of other stuff and that. But the 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 biggest side of it is showing up to do it. But then that
Yeah,
correlates to everything else that we were talking about. It's and
totally.
I find it a great sort of avenue. And I also say physical activity can be a vehicle for movement of everything else. It's a vehicle for
Yeah.
change. It can be a really good vehicle,
Yeah.
because it's like you open up so much of stuff. If you put yourself into a position of exhaustion, or what you think is your perception limit, and you keep going, you realize, oh, what else can I do? And then you realize that maybe that you bring it back to career, or maybe you'll actually step outside that comfort zone that little bit more,
Yeah.
because you've done the perception of strength is different. Perception of what you can do is different. So I'm very much in a sense of, from a physical perspective, bar and obviously the obvious health benefits of getting physically active, the jolt that it would give you for your own sort of empowerment and confidence is there's nothing like it. Because again,
Yeah.
going back to my experience of in that sort of world of like the supportive nature of, like, if you find a really good sort of, whether it be gymnasium that you go to, or a group of, whether it be running or you be dancing or whatever, the sort of people, what I find is they respect you, show up, and you put your effort in. Like, that's it. That's that. What your
Yeah.
ability, how much you're able to lift, or how much you're able to do, or what you're able to. It's all relative to you. It's no one else. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
people can spot effort.
Yeah.
And that's
Well,
what
I suppose
people, I
that's
think,
the isn't that the essence really of growth mindset versus fixed mindset,
100%.
It's effort and
Yeah,
recognizing. Yeah, but I love that, just showing up, because
yeah,
it's a difficult thing. Like every week I'm like driving over to the PT and it's like, oh God, and that's the part that I have to motivate myself to do. Once I'm there, it's
yeah.
grand.
100%.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
and it's that
Yeah.
it's, and this is where I find it so interesting, because it's the same, and it goes back to what you said earlier. We've gone completely off a tangent thanks to the dogs barking, but it doesn't matter. But it goes back to that again, that a perception of what we were talking about before, of like the fear of it's going to be worse than the actual experience, and
Mm,
that thing of like, because it is outside, outside the comfort zone, and what you're, as you said earlier, sort of people's, we were talking about I remember where we were now, the people's expectations, the highly sensitive people thinking, oh, we're thinking we're comparing ourselves to them, but we're already projecting, thinking, oh, well, they think I'm this. So we're
mm,
doubling it up, where they go, we're comparing ourselves to the person who's in the gym, who's really looks athletic or looks fit or can do this, that, and the other. But we're also saying, but they must think this of me. So we're doing
yeah.
it twice to ourselves. So it's
Yeah.
almost like you're onto a lose-lose situation, because
Yeah.
you've lost it before you've even started, if you go in
Yeah,
that
because you get
perspective.
caught in that loop then. That's what your thinking
Yes.
is. That's where your
Yeah.
focus is. So then you remain there. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's mad.
no, so no, it's I know, I think it's anyone who gets into sort of any sort of uh, newer sort of physical activity or fitness sort of regime, I think it's always a really positive thing to do it. But I'm always so much more fascinated by the emotional and mental changes in the
Mm,
person than necessarily the physical. The physicals are
mm.
great because
Of it,
it
big
just,
time.
but what it actually
It's
will do for you. Go ahead.
no, no, sorry. It's just your picture's a wee bit fuzzy there, but it's
Right.
mental health for sure. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like for highly sensitives as well and empaths, it's very much about energy management. So, the
Hmm.
meditation is really important for like energy. I work a lot with the chakras, cleansing the energies, focusing on the different energy centers. But if you don't move, then you're never releasing anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you can release a lot in meditation, but the energy release you get from physical activity, and the chemical obviously experience that happens, because studies have shown as well that HSPs would have a lower level of serotonin naturally. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So then,
Yes.
but because our system is so sensitive, when we then actually get moving, or do any activity, like to increase serotonin or dopamine, yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? So
Instant. Yeah. Yeah.
it doesn't take much. It doesn't take much
Yes.
to really feel it. So I would
Yeah.
actually, like, my favorite thing is Tai Chi and Qigong. That's what I do every week as well.
Nice.
And it's very
Cool.
gentle, but there's just
Yes.
so much strength and flexibility in the body with
Yeah.
that kind of thing. It's just, I love that.
Love it. Love it. I love it. And I love, and this as well is kind of similar to what I was saying earlier about the sort of the idea of the creative side or the thinking outside the box side, because um, what I love about, with the way you could say the positives of what we have now, in a sense of opportunity across the board. But if we stick with the sort of, I'm talking about the sort of physical activity, the opportunity to do something, anything, is so much more available. And as you say, it's like the perception could be, oh no, if I need to improve my physical health means I either have to go running or I have to go to the gym. There's still this thing of like, oh no, it's one of these things. Now, both of those things will do great things for you if you're into it. But there's so many other things that you can do. Like as you just said, the example you said there, could it be Tai Chi, could be yoga, Pilates, dancing, horse riding, swimming, badminton, tennis. Literally, there's this endless possibilities.
Yeah.
But again, because
Yeah.
people will go, I love it. It's like a quote. I was like, I think it was from years ago from watching Tony Robbins. What was it? I'm not your guru, and he's like, oh, people will say, oh, I've tried everything. It means they've tried one, two things, and they get two things, and then they give up. It's like, no, you haven't
Yeah.
tried everything. You really haven't. So,
Yeah.
like anything, there's so many more opportunities or options available if you're willing to try the
Mm.
next one. Give me one
Absolutely.
second.
Absolutely. Like I think, speaking of creativity and physical activity, when you're saying there that there's so many different opportunities and options, I think what happens, and I see it a lot in the dreaming as well, adults, we grown-ups, we forget to play, we forget to go
Yes.
back to that lovely place of play, which is what creativity is all about. And
Yes.
I would, it's the same with dreaming then. I'd often say, here you go. Here's the permission to dream, right? Yes, you're a grown up.
Yes.
Yes, you're an adult with responsibilities and the logistics come into play, but you are allowed to dream,
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
do think that some people, and maybe through life circumstance, you know what I mean? Like there's no, people don't have control over everything in their circumstance, maybe growing up, for example. But, there is a point where you can make a decision then to kind of lean into, well, what do I actually want to achieve in this life? This one chance
Yeah.
I have to be here on
Yeah.
this earth. So it really pains me when I see particularly dynamic people or forward thinking people and they're stuck in these soul destroying jobs, and
Mm.
a lot of HSPs can find themselves in that kind of rhythm that doesn't suit them,
Yeah.
and they will hit their peak sooner and they will hit burnout sooner,
Yeah.
you know?
Just bear me one moment, all right? I'm just.
Right. Yeah.
I
Go for
got.
it.
Don't worry. I'll be able to edit this.
No worries.
That's always the way. They've been quiet all day, and then as soon as it's like, I don't
Oh,
have
classic.
children. I just have dogs. It's just like, yeah, sure. Now we'll make it. Now carry on. No, no. I think that sort of wanting to get back to where we were now. So that what were you just saying there? I'm going to start this again now. So you were just saying.
What was I just saying?
No, it is the whole thing of
Uh-huh.
you're saying like that. No, that's what I remember you saying. So you were saying about like they're stuck in that sort of job or they're stuck in that thing, like
Oh,
and
yeah.
thinking there's no way out, like and because I think it's that permission, as you say, permission to play, the permission to dream, to actually think, because say like we were talking about we were talking a lot about physical activity, but we go back to sort of the career side of it. It's a massive one in a sense of, as you say, take all the sort of the needs, the logistics out of it, get to that point of, you meet the requirements or you meet your responsibilities, meet whatever, whether it be financial or etc. But
Well, James,
what is it that really and this is what so much of what I was been
I'm
doing and
losing you.
still do. You still, it's okay. It'll be fine. Um, that idea of
Yeah.
trying something different in your career, just to give it a go, to everything we talk about, to actually have that bravery to step into something that is going to be more fulfilling, is going to be what you really want to do, whether it be with purpose or things like that. And that sort of willing to step outside the zone. I remember there was, I don't know if you've ever seen the clip of it of Jim Carrey a few years ago did a sort of speech at a university. He was doing like, the
Oh, I have seen
graduation
that.
speech.
Yes.
Yeah. And the whole thing he was talking about his father, and he said his dad could have been a great comedian, but took the, the decision to take the safe pensionable job and to look after his family and did it. And then basically got laid off, and his phrase was like, why, if you're going to do something that you hate, you might as well do something you love, because you could fail at both or something, like I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
is that element of why not try? Because it could, the whole was the other one is like, oh, you might fail, but what if you fly? I think was the other one. Is that other sort of famous one as well?
Well, absolutely. But, I would refer to it as freeing your genius, right? Because I think that if you are stuck in a scenario that doesn't suit you in any way, you can get very used to that, So then you're just in a place where, you're kind of going around in circles. When it comes to purpose, I think people hang out for this, they hold on for this one purpose that is going to suddenly arrive someday, but I would tell people, stop looking for your purpose, feel into it, create it. Purpose can flow to you in so many different ways. It's so important. Like, the reason I got into career coaching is because I was intrigued by, why do people choose to do what they do? Like, why does
Yes.
one person choose to be a doctor or a paramedic and like save people's lives all day, and somebody else chooses to, sell perfume with their name on it? You know what I mean? Or whatever it is. Like,
Yeah.
these
Yeah.
vast different things that you can do with your time. And that's the thing. We are spending our time. It's something like 90,000 hours you can spend in your lifetime working. Like, I mean, that is precious time. So it really boggles my mind that people would stay in a scenario that doesn't allow them to shine in some way. Now, fair enough. We're values. We're back to values, and it's very
Yeah.
important that if someone values something else outside their work and makes that their top value, and they've made a decision, you know what, I just want the simple job that happens between
Yeah.
9 to 5, and I don't want to pour my heart and soul into it. That's a conscious decision. Totally
Yes.
respect that as well. And then maybe it's something outside of life that their passion or their purpose or their side hustle or something else is happening,
Yeah.
But if someone is kind of walking through life, or rather dragging their feet through life, it's so much lost opportunity,
Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
I think, another quote that came up in my mind there was that, like, I think it's from Dr. Valerie Young, who's the lady who's done a lot of work on imposter syndrome. And she says that everyone loses when bright people play small, and it's so
Yes.
true. Like,
Yeah.
why would you
Absolutely.
not,
Yeah.
try, give it your all, especially when it's aligned, when it flows easily to you, when it's part of your strength, when it's part of the skills that you have inherently,
Yeah. Absolutely.
definitely.
Yeah, no, it's
Mhm.
right, and I think it's because I used to refer to that myself when, because you said it earlier that when in previous careers you say you were playing a role, and that was almost like very much the same thing. I was like acting. It was like playing that acting when you turn up and do the
Mhm.
thing, whatever you don't really care about. The other thing I used to refer to was like, if you got that, you say you got that dream element or that thing in your head or the spark as whatever, but you don't act on it. So it's just playing and playing and playing in the back of your mind. I used to refer to myself almost like I was hiding. You're like kind of hiding in plain sight. You have this really sort
Mhm.
of powerful thing that you're really into, that you would, no one's telling you to do this stuff. You would be reading all about it. You'd be watching all about it. You'd be thinking all about it. No one's, it's not like someone's school grading you or anything like that. You're just so into something that you do it. But whether for whatever reason you're unwilling to put yourself out there with it or to do it publicly or whatever, but you really want to, but you're kind of hiding in plain sight. Those, as you say, that the people that you, this quote you just said is like, it could impact so many more people than just the person themselves. And I think there's that
Exactly.
element of allowing yourself, when you allow yourself to do that thing and shine that bright, you'd be amazed at how many people it actually has a positive impact on.
Exactly. Exactly. And again, it's how, as you described it earlier, things happen that are unexpected. So people's
Yeah.
responses to it are unexpected, and then we do kind of, this is the ego again. We have this inflated sense that, well, if I'm going to do this thing, I'm going to be judged a lot by X person that's in your head, that maybe person you went to school with or something, and
Yeah.
it's definitely not the case. Everyone is just doing their own thing.
Yeah.
Everyone is just trying to get through and do their own thing. So, you're not really protecting yourself from anything.
No.
That's actually a falsehood. This
Yeah.
thing that you're protecting yourself from is not there. So yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I agree with you entirely. Like, I would implore people to lean into their ideas. They have been
Mm.
given these ideas from the ether or from the universe or from wherever
Yeah.
for a reason. And it matters. Their purpose absolutely matters. And
Mm.
that's kind of the message I try to get across to particularly my HSP clients who are kind of maybe are well practiced in turning down the volume on these incredible things that they have or that they
Mm.
want to do.
Absolutely. I'm interested in where you said it, because I have spoken to a number of coaches on this show, and say how people got into it. But and especially when you touched on it there in a sense of career coaching, it's interesting. I like the genesis of your reason was like, well, why do people choose the career they've chosen? It's an interesting sort of introduction, because I think there's the element, I think, of curiosity can be an underestimated thing, or an underappreciated thing, in the sense of the reason why we do something, or the reason, whether it be an interest in it, but just to be curious about something, and then to then
Mm.
navigate into it. I always think it's an interesting thing. You said earlier you'd be
Absolutely, to
doing
be
it.
drawn to
Yeah,
it at all. Yeah.
100%. I mean, you've been doing it in sort of in some space of the world for 15 years now, in a sense of
Mm.
coaching. This is an interesting, because you've been doing it for a good chunk of time there. It's like, what do you think's changed in the sort of coaching sphere, so for yourself, over those 15 years?
Oh wow, that is a good question. As a HSP, my answer is I have to give it some thought. No, I'm only joking. But I do, like, my brain is firing off in 20 directions
Yeah,
because, um, I work as a coach online, very much based on my own philosophy, but I also work as a coach in consultancy to, a HR company,
yeah,
so they
yeah,
would have a particular approach to things, and a particular
yeah.
philosophy, so I think what's happened with coaching has gone in two directions at the same time. One is that it is just becoming more and more understood, more appreciated, more magical, more specialized. People are finding their niche, and they're helping people they're empowering people in such specific ways, that kind of thing. But then on the other hand, it has devalued in a way, because anyone and everyone is out there calling themselves a coach, and that is disappointing to me, because it is very much, it is a discipline. It's something that we've studied. We've put a lot of time and effort into understanding how it is you hold space for someone, how you empower someone, how you use questions in a very particular way so that someone can understand themselves. I believe coaching at its core is very much it's at its essence is education, the purest form of education, because you're not teaching anything, you're empowering the wisdom of someone
Mm,
else to come to the fore. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's an interesting space. Me, I suppose, I'm bravely be you. I'm out there doing it my way, and I think that I am trying to lead the thought leaders and lead the trailblazers by trailblazing in whatever way I can myself. Because I think if you
mm,
don't walk the talk as a coach, if you're not coachable yourself, then what
mm,
kind of coach are you? Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
And I think a lot of people believe that a coach is someone who just goes out and tells someone what to do. And that
mm,
is not the case. It's a very, very different thing even to mentorship. It's a very different
mm.
space. Would you agree with all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. And absolutely. And I think it's kind of like, I say, I just qualified a few years ago, and still trying to sort of find myself in a way in the space and in the industry, and it does. It's very much one of those. There's a moment in time now where it does now, maybe because I'm in that space, that I see everyone, as you say, is around you, is some sort of coach or something. But the interesting thing is, I continue to figure myself out while you do it. I think, as you say, it's not an ending thing. And
Hmm.
how do I find myself in that space, or how do I find myself in what I'm doing? But there's the most important thing, I think, for anything that I've learned in it, is to allow yourself to be as quiet as possible when you're with someone. You're there to support them, but in a way of allowing them to be the one that's doing the talking. It's
Yeah,
you're not. It's remembering you're not there as a to fix anything. They're not broken. They're not. There's nothing wrong with
exactly.
anyone, and what you're trying to be is. Um, to give them the opportunity, as I said earlier, for them to maybe say things that they've never said to anyone, but not in a sort of like, this isn't, again, we're not, it's not counseling, it's not therapy, it's nothing like that. It's the you're, is what you said, the essence, you're trying to enable them to say the thing, that spark, that dream, that thought, whatever it is, that they really would love to say. But if they said it in front of someone else who they really care about, is going to either laugh in their face or judge them, or go, or they maybe have said something before and they go, well, Jesus, you can't do that, you're thick as this, or what is that, or whatever. The Because I have no perception on the person who's coming in front of me. I have no preconceived idea of who they are or how they are or whatever. So that to me is that sort of like, I'm just there to essentially listen and then trace
Yeah.
something back. That's
Yeah.
it's
It's
an
a soundboard,
unbelievable
isn't it?
bridge. Yeah, 100%.
Mm.
But a soundboard that's also going to as well, that kind of put it back on them, that a soundboard that's going to go, but actually
Of
just wanted
course.
the whole thing of like, you know, you said this but said that, can you see how they don't match? You're saying this but
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
seeing that. It's the soundboard that has a bit of bite to it as well, and kind of goes, well, actually
Yeah. Well,
they
you're offering back the patterns. You're offering back what you're
100%.
observing. Yeah, which
Yeah,
is essential, and
absolutely.
you're
Yeah,
offering the beauty of objectivity, which is what you
yeah,
don't get from your loved ones. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, no, it's a
And it's
powerful, powerful tool. And, everyone should have a coach,
yeah,
and I suppose me and you are very much familiar with it. We're in the realm of
yeah,
coaches, so, everyone creates their own echo chamber, especially online, but there is a
yeah,
lot of people maybe out there that would be very unfamiliar with the world of
yeah.
coaching still.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
absolutely,
So,
100%. But I think as well, though, it's like the previous sort of perception of it as well, and we talk about it from coaching going back sort of maybe 20 years or so. It was only, especially in the world of work, it was the CEO, it was the executive. It's even,
mm,
and I get it from some ways in sense of like, maybe it's more marketing than anything. It's like, oh no, it's high performance. It's this. It's got to be da 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 da. And it's like, well, okay, get it, but that's more marketing than anything. It's like, just because then people go, well, I'm not a high performer, I can't get a coach, again, it's nonsense. Like, it's just that's just the way it's been. That person is presenting them as, I'm a high performance coach, but what does that actually mean? It doesn't, just because what you have to be earning X amount to get a coach, or you have to be
yeah.
so high up
Well,
in a
though,
company to it's you know
those trends have definitely changed. Like the company that I
mm,
consult for, Randstad RiseSmart is the name. It's a HR global company, one of the leaders in the market, and they are absolutely fantastic. They're forward thinking, and they have rolled out recently work-life coaching. It's called, where it's beyond the C-suite as such.
yeah,
It's coaching for everybody, and for
100%.
people to be able to access that, understand their daily experience of work, the balance that they require in their life to be able to perform at work, how to have difficult conversations, how to become more visible in your company, how to build your personal brand, all these things that work on the individual.
Mm,
Not just somebody who has already climbed that ladder,
yeah,
which is kind of
that
counterintuitive,
makes
really, when you think about it.
yeah,
So, yeah, I think it's becoming more and more kind of normal, isn't it? Especially in
yeah.
larger companies.
Yeah,
Yeah, which is
absolutely.
great.
Because it has to. Because the thing is, like, if you have a one level, especially the top level of a company, whichever the size, that has had this experience of coaching, so they're able to think and feel in a certain way, but no one else in that company has ever had that experience. Well, there's going to be a disconnect, because
Yeah,
they've been able to have gone through this process that enables them to be in a certain way, but no one else below them has. So they're going to look and go, why are these people like, how are, they're going to think that they're not going to. So if it wouldn't make sense that you would have that experience and know to be that way, but the people that essentially drive the company or do the work have ever had that level, because it's in the end, coaching, when you realize it as well, and I'm sure you've maybe experienced this, is like when I've either conversed with people on the show or I've been with them in a coaching situation, whatever, regardless of level, if we want to call them a level, whether it's CEO or entry level, or if you're, you've earned 1 million or you've earned, you know, average industrial wage, everyone has the same experiences. Everyone has those same
yeah.
imposter syndrome thoughts, those deep,
Same
those
doubts. Yeah,
same doubts.
same wobbles.
So
Yeah,
it's just at a different point in time or a different perspective. So we are
yeah,
more similar than we would think. So the person who's at entry level into a company is thinking, oh God, I can't believe I'm working in this imposter syndrome. The person who's just got promoted into the executive board is having almost identical
Yeah,
mirror image of experience, of feeling. It's just one's in the board and one's just in the door. The human experience is still the human experience. So
absolutely.
why would you not give that entry level person the same opportunities to understand themselves as you would the person who's just joined the board? Makes no sense.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Absolutely. Totally agree with you. Totally agree with you.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's where hierarchies and labels and old systems, old approaches, they're not really functioning in the way that they used to, because everyone has more connection, everyone has more
Yep.
knowledge, everyone has the knowledge at the tip of their fingertips, you know what I mean? So
Yep.
it's definitely shifted. It's not that same. I suppose it depends, of course, on the industry. Some
Yep.
industries are a bit more forward thinking and a bit more, I suppose, focused on diversity and equality. And some maybe are still based on culture and legacy. So it's going to
Sure.
depend on the scenario each
100%.
time. But yeah, everyone
Yeah.
deserves a chance to feel empowered at whatever stage they're at.
Yeah.
Definitely.
100%. And
Yeah.
I think as well, um, I always, I don't know if you know of Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary
Yeah.
V, American. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I love him. And I love one of his sort of phrases. He said, we're throwing them all in today. He says, the market decides, is kind of one of his things. Like, so if you think of it from as as the generations go on, if people, like, as you say, the world of even personal development, coaching, in its truest sense, is become a more of a normal thing that people grow up with it, then those people
Yeah.
who are going to be the future employees of companies, they'll be deciding whether they'll go to who they work for and work with if these things are there. Not sense of like, one is there's career progression. You have people who are very much focusing on wanting to be able to climb the ladder, all those sorts of cliches of progression career. But some people are like, no, I want my own. How are you going to support me as a person within this place?
Mm.
They not necessarily have ambition to be promoted, etc., but maybe they still want to have their own coaching in a sense of developing themselves, and they'll dictate, well, actually, where we're going to work. Because if you can't support me in that regard, so it may take some time, but
Definitely.
companies, I think, in 5-10 years time are going to have this as standard, because if they don't,
Oh yeah.
they're not going to get people to come work for them.
100%. Like, and I suppose that's already the way it's talent retention, and that's already
Yes.
the way in a lot of cases, so if you want to keep your best people, you have to look after them. And that is
Yeah.
very, very different to maybe a generation ago, 20 or 30 years ago, when you were the lucky one to have a job. You know what I mean? It
Yes.
has completely turned around.
Yeah.
But I think it's very interesting to look at multi-generations within a company, and to look at the different lens that each generation brings and the different experience, and then the perception that the other generations have of that generation, like it's a melting pot, but a really intriguing one. So the more questions that we can ask to bring that wisdom to the surface for each individual, the more diverse and beautiful and colorful the melting pot,
Yeah.
so
100%.
it can only be a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I think we definitely shared enough quotes in this show, so I don't need to ask the specific question.
We obviously
But
like quotes. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. But I think, but that's why I kind of, and I'm so glad you shared so many. And I'm saying, because I find that if they can be used in an applicable way, for saying something for the sake of it. And I think I said that's so interesting. It's like, if you find something, a turn of phrase or a quotation that kind of like really kind of goes, oh yeah, because it can literally bring you out of a moment or bring you into a moment. It can literally
Mm.
change the way you're thinking in that specific moment in time to get you to either take action, take a moment. It can really have a real one psychological, physiological change, but then really push you to do something as well. So that's why I think they can be so powerful.
They are powerful, but a lot of them, you have to kind of give the context as well, because
Mm,
sometimes a quote or a concept or an idea is powerful because it's in hindsight, so we
yeah.
can look back and know that, who said it, when did they say it, in what context did they
Yes.
say it. And I think that's
Yes.
all really important, because I could say it right now, But
Yeah.
is it as powerful as somebody who said it 50 years ago, who you know the context? Probably
Yeah.
not, you know. But
Yes.
okay, one last quote, right? So the
Yeah, go
classic
for it.
quote about everyone's a genius. You know, everyone's a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, that one is really interesting to me because it's attributed to Albert Einstein all the time, but apparently he didn't say it at all. You know, so sometimes we can use these quotes and then people can
Yeah.
kind of apply them in whatever way that they want. But
Yes.
as you say, if it gets the point across, if it allows for an aha moment, then as
Yeah.
coaches we're going to be happy with that, aren't we?
Yes, absolutely. But yeah, because it's interesting even that you're sharing that one again with us, because the gentleman I was just chatting to last week, whose episode just went out today on the day we're recording this, an American chap who's kind of refers to himself as a futurist, and he's very much about education.
Oh,
Is kind of
brilliant.
his, yeah, and the sort of the idea of like how education will need to change and has, you know, the sort of formal education side of it as well. But first, you know, education versus lifelong learning as he perceived it. And very much on this thing of like, you know, the idea of we're just grading everyone to give them a piece of paper. Is that really what we see as
Yeah.
education going forward? But kind of, and that kind of comes back to where we were talking about things like the idea of coaching, because you know, even we're talking about people from an employment perspective, but even there was a lady I spoke to before. She's working in the UK on like with her company is building resilience in young minds. So she works with schools and things like that. The whole thing of that idea of resilience. Now she's coming from from maybe a psychotherapy perspective and things like that. But the idea of building resilience with children, not just telling them you need to be more resilient, that doesn't work. So
No,
it's
that's not
the
going to
idea
work.
of that's not going to work. But this whole sort of space, umbrella world of what we call it, of horrible to say the phrase of wellness or well-being, personal development, they're always been referred to as the softer skills and all this that sort of
Mm,
downplayed versus the sort of education, which is like that can be graded.
yeah.
Because what we essentially do, there is no grade. There is, you know, you work with the person, it's how they are as themselves is the result
Mm,
and what they go on
mhm.
to do. But there should, as you said, like the age of people working in a company, but at any age, it's like anyone can benefit from knowing more about themselves and how they
Yeah.
are in the world. So that's the element of where anyone can benefit from it.
Absolutely. You know, it's self-awareness. And I think, you know, like when I think of that particular quote about the fish climbing the tree, and you know, living its life believing it's stupid, like I've heard that in the context of neurodiversity as well, you know, and
Mm,
I'm so glad that there's a shift in the narrative around neurodiversity and the magic and strength that people with ADHD or ASD or other long list of conditions, you know, or experiences. I don't even like saying the word condition.
no.
Um, there's so much that they can offer to the workplace as well, you know.
Yep.
So we're definitely moving away from black and white thinking, you know, grading, judgment. Do you fit the bill? Do you not? Can I squeeze you into this box that I have or not? You know, because the people that I work with, you know, like what came up quite recently is that even the process of interviewing is a very difficult thing for someone who's in any way neurodiverse. It just doesn't really work. It feels convoluted. It doesn't, it's, you know, and so a lot of leadership is being lost through these
Yeah.
outdated systems. I really do think that. So, you know, I must
100%.
listen to that episode. Yeah, the Futurist. Isn't that a fantastic job to have?
Yeah. Oh yeah, he was yeah, absolutely. But it was really interesting. He had some really sort of interesting sort of tips and stuff in relation to sort of like he wasn't say not knocking sort of formal education at all and things like that, but it was like we were talking about things like he's obviously in the States, so the whole thing of potentially going to university or college and things like that. But his real focus, and where I completely agreed with him, is like it's not about whether you do it, it's your intention behind it, you know, and that comes to
Mm,
so many things. It's kind of like he's like, if you're going it just so you can get that piece of paper, the certificate chasing type thing, just so you can put a letter
yeah.
on the end of your name, or just so you can, you know, we can. I'm sure you maybe come across this, and I definitely was coupled myself thinking, oh, if I get that other certificate, then I'll be, when I get that,
Yeah,
then I'll
I
be
do it
that.
all the
Thinking
time. Yeah.
the belief that like, oh, I need to have more, I need to do more learning, I need to do more. But really it's a stalling tactic to go out and do really this kind of either imposter syndrome is something, it's like putting
Yeah, the
self off.
actual work, the actual
The actual
scary part. Yeah.
Exactly. Versus, well, actually, what's your sort of gut, your intention, your worth to do it? If it's because, I really want to learn this, I really want to study whatever it is, he's like, go for it. There's commitment there.
Mm.
But for the sake of stuff, to move away from doing it just so, that was really, really interesting. And he gave like sort of like a
Mm.
list of things, questions
I
to ask
suppose
yourself.
I'm just wondering though, if that's kind of fair enough, say for myself or yourself, where we're kind of going, oh, what's the next thing that I could learn? But like if it's a young person who's coming out of school and is wondering, well, am I going to go to university or not if I'm only doing it to get this piece of paper? But if the world is set up in such a way that they can't progress without the piece of
100,
paper, then,
100%. Yeah.
they're going to have to play ball as such.
Yeah, and I think though, but again, I think as well though, and it might take a few years. I think that again is shifting a little bit as well, because
Mm.
the element in the sense of, the differences. Say, for example, depending on the, and I'm not knocking university as well, because I say I loved my sort of time 20 years ago that it was a university, and the experience that it can bring. But there is an element in a sense of, obviously there's going to be certain professions and jobs that are going to require that. It's always going to be a standard and changes. But say, for
Yeah.
example, in relation to something like, if we think of the world of tech and things like that, in sense of software and coding and stuff, people can do that at home with this. Like, now, there's people who are into it. They
Yeah.
don't need to go to it. They'll know how to do it. So, and then there's people who are literally making, if it's because that's the profession you want to go into and that's where you learn. Again, it's like, what's the intent? Because here's the gas thing. I did a sports degree, and so whatever 20 odd years ago as it was, I had an element of coaching into it, which is kind of like, you could kind of say, where I've kind of always gone. Have I ended up working within the sporting industry? No. Have I ended up in a sort of coaching element? Yes. But, there's the, again, going back, I think it was Gary Vee, and I mentioned this with the guy as well, that it, like, years gone by, the return on investment, as he said, is like having that college diploma or university degree was going to guarantee that you were going to earn more than the money you put into university. That's kind of coming down a little bit now, and it's not as obvious that you're going to get the same money back as what you put in to get that university degree. It's not completely
Yeah.
there, but there's some now that are like, whether you have it or not isn't the biggest thing. So I think it is shifting, but I think some of those industries are still kind of like, oh, well, you don't meet our minimum requirement, even though they could be losing out on an amazing
I know.
person that thinks that way. So there will be, I think, not necessarily straight away, but there will be a bit of a shift in it. I'm thinking now of sort of like, I've got my nieces and stuff who are coming up to that, whether they'll make that choice or decision. It'll be interesting to see whether they need it or require it to go and to do whatever they want to do. I think as well, I
Yeah.
remember chatting to a guy last year on a show. I mentioned this again in a different episode, where he had children that sort of age, but when they're now going through sort of career conversations, if you want to call it, through school, you'll probably have 4 or 5 different careers now as a young person. Literally,
Oh, yeah.
not just jobs, careers, different industries.
Yeah.
So the reality that the shift will bring, in a sense of what I think is an interesting, from a few, again, the future is like the jobs that we don't even know are there yet. That's
Yeah. Yeah.
the
Isn't that
mad thing to
exciting though?
think.
I think
Very exciting.
I think it's something like 11 is the average amount of pivots people will do in their career. You know what I mean? I read that somewhere.
Yeah.
Now that might have changed. That was like a 2017 figure or something from Gallup. So it's very much the norm, whereas I think people maybe from our generation came out of college, had a certain qualification, and then because of that went on a certain trajectory, and their whole life then, or let's say 10 or 20 years of their career, was quite reactive based on those initial steps. You know what I mean? Whereas I do think that the younger generations are thinking very differently. They're not thinking like that immediately, And it's funny, I spoke to just a friend just today whose son is doing their leaving cert here, and so. And I was saying, look, bottom line, like, let him follow his heart. Let him
Yeah.
heart overhead, because there is definitely so much scope and
Yes.
flexibility in whatever happens. Whereas if you try to plan ahead and go for a degree that maybe will get you this great job in 10 years, it will be completely different in 10 years.
Yes.
So,
100%.
definitely yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Just following your heart, following your instinct, following the interest in that
Yes.
moment at that point of your life,
Yes.
being as proactive as you can, as early as you can, I think makes such a difference.
100%. And this is why, in a sense of, I really love this question of the show, in a sense of what's important, because it's also touches on one of the subjects we covered earlier, in a sense of like, no one's ever finished. There's no point of like, ta-da, I've
Mm.
arrived, because the whole thing of importance will change depending on your age, your circumstance,
Yeah.
what's happened, things that you didn't know would happen, things that did, if someone gets sick, or if someone loses a job, or all these circumstances that we do not know necessarily what will happen, or things that are pre-planned. And a lot of the people I've spoken to on the show, they've had a 20-year career in something that they really enjoyed. And so some people say, "Oh, I never wanted to do that," and I ended up doing it. Some people, they loved it, but they come to a point where it's like, I'm
Mm.
done now. I need to do something different.
Yeah.
And this is the
Yeah.
time we have actually opportunity to make those pivots,
Yeah.
is the word you call it. And then there's an allowance to do it. And I think it's becoming a much more acceptable thing that, oh God, oh, you were a teacher, but now you're running a cupcake stand. Okay. Do you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
okay. You know what I mean? Oh,
Yeah,
I thought,
totally.
it's the fact that you can completely flip, and I think
Mm.
that's an amazing thing, that we're allowing ourselves to people to do that, the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's
Yeah.
so exciting. That's kind of
Yeah.
the recreation of the identity thing we were talking about, Like, I would
Yes.
often talk about values that, like, when I was 20, living in Dublin, like, really all that mattered was what was happening on Friday night. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now,
100%.
I'm 41, living in Donegal with my husband and 2 children. My values, my needs, my priorities, my focus, completely different. So if I was trying to make
100%.
plans as a 20-year-old for this version of me, you cannot do that. Like, you
No,
can't.
exactly.
That's the
And
beauty of this expansive nature of our lives. It's
yeah,
continues to expand all the time.
exactly. And that's where now, I think, and you said it, where when it comes to sort of young people, in the sense of that sort of school, college, university year things, in a sense of that, the changing of it, and have taking that little bit more time and thinking over it, and that, like, because it has changed in the 20 years since I went to
Mm.
uni, in a sense of that was the progression. If it was like, if I didn't go to uni, it was like, right there where I was living, these are the jobs, you know what I mean? So it's kind of like,
Mm.
it was so linear in some respects. And so it was like, now it's kind of like, well, it's not to say it's not the right thing, but there's so much more. And I think the conversations can be broader, and from a uh, I'm not in that position, but from a parenting perspective as well, to think it's okay if they don't as well go to uni. It's like that.
Mm.
It's the whatever they want to do, or whatever can be done. It's much more of a there's much more opportunity now, and I don't think it's something to be feared. That, if depending on what people do, because they can always go back. Like, the opportunities to
Yeah.
do education never stop.
Yeah, exactly. But I suppose to balance that, you do want to motivate and empower youngsters, school leavers, um, to to pursue something, to
100%.
explore and get out there and do something. It's so essential that element of education still happens. But what I think is really sad at the moment, I actually heard it on the radio just this morning, that, like, dropout rates are much higher now even than pre-COVID, because students don't have anywhere to live. They can't
Mm,
get somewhere near the college campus, so
yeah.
they can't have the college experience. And like a huge part of education and going to university when I went 20 years ago as well was very much the experience around the academic learning. And if that's been stripped away because of housing or whatever the issue is, then I think that's a bigger disservice to young people, you know, to the generation that need each other, but yet they have to go back home every evening. You know?
100%. And then there's like so many things we spoke about, and that's kind of, that was one of the biggest draws for me to go to uni, in a sense, was that I wanted to have that university experience. And freedom. I wanted, it was the freedom. It was the first time, obviously, living away from home. And I couldn't get further from home if you thought about it. Like at the time I grew up in Germany. So my parents were in Germany. Right. I was up in Liverpool, you know what I mean? So I couldn't be further away from home as I went to Scotland, you know? So, you know, but it's that thing of like living on your own, cooking, cleaning, all those sort of young, you know, things that you didn't do as a necessarily young person. And you're just doing with a similar peer group, you know, and getting into all sorts of whatever you get up to, and the things that go wrong and things that go right, living the experience without anyone there to kind of hold your hand. That's exactly what it is. And so it is a real shame that part of it could be lost due to financial constraints on people, you know, and that's
the expansive. You know, that's the expansive experience around whatever you're learning academically, or, you know, even, you know, if you're in an internship or whatever your focus is, if you don't have the expansive experience, you know, of your development in every way as a person, then you are definitely going to be missing out. Because, like, you know, if you think about students that were in college during COVID, they just had to sit, you know, learn what they were learning, you know, from the screen in their bedroom, you know, and it really was, I think it hit young people much harder because of that. You know, I saw that personally, you know, within our own family, you know, young people who just, you know, it was such bad timing, you know, when you should be exploring and out there, and that real kind of extroverted part of your life, you know. And it's very hard to put young people like that and say, oh no, you can't do that, you have to come back home to your parents' house every evening or whatever it might be, you know. So absolutely. But it's a tough one. It's a tough one.
Because absolutely, because it's even you don't, because of say something, it's obviously the societal problem in the sense of housing and especially renting and things like that. Because of that as well, one, even if you say to discard in the sense of the university as an experience, but even the idea of a group of young people being able to just work and rent on their own, you know, having flatmates or housemates, and even that has been limited and diminished, you know, so even just the opportunity to just be able to say, have that bit of freedom, not necessarily on your own, but just with a group of mates. Even if you weren't going to college, you were just all going to work, and you all rented a place together. Even those experiences are for that sort of group of people that from the sort of like 18 up to sort of 18 to 25-year-old, where you kind of just like that experience of just being with group of mates or just living with other people, whether it be, you know, young professionals, whatever you want to call it, is at a loss now, you know, because of all those societal and challenges already. And it is that is,
and they're very important friendships that are built at that time as well. You know, and you know, they're the friendships that you they're the lifelong friendships, aren't they?
100%.
You know, the ones that even if you don't see each other, it doesn't really matter. You sit down, it's exact same type thing.
100%.
That's precious, like in life, to have friends like that.
Yeah, and those are definitely, when we're talking about sort of lifelong learning versus education, those are the sort of, those experiences are the ones that you say that really stand to you, as much as the sort of academic side of stuff. It's those getting yourself essentially into a situation that you have to get yourself out of, learning from you know, whatever it may be or whatever. And because the thing is touching as well, because when you said about young people and COVID, I remember chatting to a guy, and the Porrick Danaher is the chap's name. Again, he was on the show last year, and he was an occupational therapist, and he works with a lot of young people. So I was asking him the question about how did it affect young people, and one of the points he shared with me was similar. Like we think of that maybe slightly younger, that sort of 15, 16, 17-year-old group of people that were, essentially at home for that length of time. He said one of the biggest developmental pieces that they missed out on, that's caused a lot of anxiety in young people, is put into those moments of embarrassment that they've missed out on in school and stuff, going through those sort of awkward teenage years where something would go wrong in school, but they would experience it, get over it, laugh it off, whatever, and it would carry on. They missed
Right.
out on this for 2 years, and then they get to suddenly to be 18, and it's like, oh, you're
Yeah,
not
they're
very
expected
resilient,
to.
but they've been just in their bedroom for 2 years. That was the only
Yeah.
safe space they had, and nothing happened. Nothing out of the ordinary happened. Nothing bizarre,
Yeah.
or
It's too
so
safe.
they too safe. Nothing
Too safe.
unexpected happened that they were able to then learn from the whatever experience to then
Yeah.
enable them to do it. The usual things of the sense of, oh, someone fell over in the in the school or whatever, or they asked someone out and they got declined, and all those sort of normal
Yeah.
young person experiences that we all
Yeah.
gone through. They missed out on it for 2 years, and it's crucial time. So I thought that was a really interesting
Yeah. It's very interesting. Yeah.
example of how
Yeah.
that can, and especially so if people, especially a young person who is already feeling maybe on the anxious side anyway, it just kind of, well, their only safe space is their bedroom, and that's, so you're having a lot of young people to pull out of that.
It's funny because I'm thinking about the introvert versus the extrovert, because when COVID hit and lockdown happened, I saw a lot of kind of posts online that, like, for the introvert it was kind of a sigh of relief initially, because it's like, okay, I have the permission to spend more time alone, be in my house a bit more, be in that safe zone. I'm walking down the street, I don't necessarily have to run over there and talk to those people because I'm not supposed to, or whatever. There was a lovely sense of safety and maybe distance and peace, and there were such different phases to the lockdown and all of that. It's so interesting to look back on. But if you have, say, a highly sensitive person or someone who's very introverted, and they have at that very keen developmental stage haven't had any of those challenges at all, I'd be very interested to see what the difference would be between the extrovert and the introvert in that instance. You know what I mean? It may well be that the extrovert would actually feel the negative effects more so,
Yeah,
than the introvert, because they didn't get to flex those extrovert muscles. You know what I mean? And I'm not
100%.
saying that it's black and white, like I would be
No.
very extroverted in some cases, and there's the ambivert or whatever in the middle, but
Yeah.
it's interesting. It's interesting
Yeah.
how temperament, how these traits that I'm so intrigued with would make a huge difference to that point you've just made,
Yeah.
developmentally.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sinead, we could keep talking for hours and hours, I'm sure.
We
But
could chat all evening.
yeah, and it has been wonderful to chat to you. Even with my dogs
You
losing
too,
their
Dave. It's
mind
been
at one
brilliant.
point. I do have one more question for you before I let you go, and
Okay.
that is, what's important for your future?
What's important for my future? Oh, wow. I think, you know, my health. My health is important for
Mm,
my future. My experience of this physical body, being grounded in who I truly am, being the role model that I want to be for my kids. That's the one that always comes up for me.
mm,
Um, and giving myself the best chance possible to excel and shine, so that I'm not just doing it for everyone else,
yeah,
but I'm actually, turning some of that empowerment back towards myself. I think that is what's key for me in terms of where I'm at personally. And as I was saying to you, if you're a coach and you're not working on yourself, you want to ask yourself, why are you a coach in the first place?
yeah.
So yeah, empowerment, I think, is the answer there
Love it, love it.
for myself. Yeah.
Um, Love it. Thanks so much for sharing that. As I say, Sinead, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat to you, and I really do thank you for coming on. I want to make sure that people continue to support you, and I'd love them to be able to know where they can follow you and connect online. I will share all of your links in the show notes, but if you want to give a shout out now where people can follow and connect with you online.
Yes, fantastic. So SineadRaffertyCoaching.com is my website. So that's kind of the hub where you can begin. I have a quiz on there. So if you want to find out what is your number one block that's holding you back kind of from the life you dream of, that's specifically for HSPs and empaths. And I've actually just opened a new Facebook group. It's called the Inspired HSP. So that's for thought leaders and trailblazers, HSPs, sensitives, empaths, change makers. So I invite you to check that out as well. And yeah, it would be brilliant to connect with loads more people who are forward thinking and creative and, you know, want to make an impact. So yeah, definitely connect with me. I would love to do that.
Brilliant stuff. As I said, those links will be shared in the show notes, everyone. So please make sure you check out all those links from Sinead. So once again, thank you so much, Sinead, for chatting to me today.
Thank you, James. An absolute pleasure.
Thank you for watching or listening to this episode. I really hope you enjoyed the conversation. To support the show, please subscribe on your favorite platform, share your favorite episode, get involved with your comments, and give the show a rating. If you want to learn more about what I do, you can follow me at James Dean Coaching on Facebook and Instagram, connect with me on LinkedIn, or check out my website, jamesdeancoaching.com.